Welcome to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. The key to getting the most out of the seminar series is to listen to the small things, the subtle adjustments our faculty teams adhere to when the fishing might be tough or they're trying to target trophy game fish. That's what we call the gold nuggets of the seminar series. So come with me, let's get right to it and join, in progress, the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.
Coming to you from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, it's the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Now, here's George Poveromo.
Welcome to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. A very popular segment on our seminar series, particularly when we go mid-Atlantic to the Northeast, is striped bass. And there are numerous ways to catch stripers, from school fish to trophies. And I want to focus on catching the biggest of all striped bass, trophy class fish. And I have a very distinguished panel in doing so. We have Crazy Alberto Nee, who's taken more big bass than probably even legal when you think about that. That's how effective he is. And in the middle, to really make things interesting, geographically, we have John Owens, who catches striped bass out of the Carolinas. And then also from Jersey, I like to call him one of the young guns. The guy does it all from offshore to inshore, and he does it in very impressive fashion. That's Ryan DeGraw. So we got the bases covered here with tactics, and I want to try to break this down if I can and hold it to maybe two different segments here. Let's talk about live baiting for trophy bass, then we'll sort of segue into trolling for them. But let's talk about the tactics involved in live baiting. And Ryan, I'm going to start with you, because I've done this a number of times over the years with a lot of Jersey anglers. When is the prime time to start catching the real big bass off of Jersey?
To be brutally honest with you, George, it changes every year, especially for the boat fishing. Sometimes the fish are in closer to the beach. Sometimes the fish are out by the 3-mile line. Sometimes the fish are in with the bait. Sometimes you got to make bait and then go present the bait elsewhere. I know that this year is definitely going to be an interesting year because of the new circle hook regulation that's being imposed. Any bait fishing for striped bass, whether it be bunker, worms, clams, anything, you need to use a circle hook now, which is going to definitely throw everyone for a little bit of a loophole this year, which especially because the whole snag and drop aspect of live lining for stripers is completely cut out now, since you're not, obviously you can't snag and drop with circle hooks, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens this year.
But you'll find too, and we lived through this with our snook and a lot of our species here, the circle hook, you'll find very easy to adapt. In the long haul, you're going to catch more and bigger fish. You're going to lose a lot less fish, and it's going to be so much better for the stocks of striped bass. It's a win-win, and I'm surprised it had taken that long. But not to shift gears here, but what would be your prime conditions to try to go get a trophy striped bass?
The weather needs to be not good. If I'm looking to really target big striped bass, the weather needs to be not good. Northeast wind, overcast skies, rain never hurts. Some of the best days of striper fishing I've ever had, especially finding them on schools of bunker in the spring, have been on very, very, very rough days in the spring. Like mid to late May through early June is probably the best time in Central Jersey to catch a trophy striped bass.
All right, and when you're on those bait schools, what tells you that this is going to give you your best odds of nailing a big trophy?
So if I'm looking to fish in a school of bait, that bait needs to be spraying. 90% of the time it's going to be bunker, and if I don't see the bunker really spraying on top or really pushing water and moving around quickly, if they're just kind of milling around, flicking once in a while, I'm not going to be fishing in that school of bait.
You're looking for panic.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And speaking of panic, we're going back to the Carolinas, but I didn't mean in that aspect of it there, Job. But
might need to.
Does the scenario change in your striped bass fishing? You hear about the talk about being really nasty weather, the hard northeasters. What goes on in your area to set a good time?
So George, we're doing a lot of river fishing more than
Right.
ocean fishing, and for me, which is. Now, I know plenty of species that love nasty weather, but for our fish being in the tannic, brown, darker water, I love fair weather.
There you go.
Bluebird skies, bright sun, light winds. It can be windy, we'll catch them, but it's easier to do it because we're throwing a lot of artificials. But I like those pretty days. That's when I catch the most fish and the biggest fish.
And I've got to tell you, I've done that up there too, and it's remarkable when you do get the beautiful day and you're just working artificial for bass. It's a different scenario.
It
Not that
really
you don't get
is.
the beautiful days up north and get on, but it's an intriguing deal.
It is, it really is.
All right, now, Alberto, I know what you're going to say in addition tonight. I know you like to add the non-human hours you like. All right, you're hearing us talk about that. What is, if you want to try to target a big trophy bass, and maybe let me nail you on this too, is you always talk about this magical period, this magical time. You put your warlock outfit on and you're waving this wand. Let's really get down into reality here. When is that magical time?
You're
I'm
actually
going there.
Okay. What can I say? Well, over 50 some odd years of precise logging, I found patterns. Let's talk about the magical window. Magical window is identifying the specific time, follow the migration, where they're going to be, find honey holes. And ultimately, the non-human hours is a time where very few people will go. Their premium prime spot, fish, calculate with the wind, moon, and tide. With that specific migration, that's just the beginning.
Oh, and you're saying pockets. Define somebody's pockets. What do you mean by
A
that?
structure,
Okay.
a pocket around inlets, back
where these
bays,
fish would hold.
bridges, a staging area. Yeah.
Very intriguing on that too. And we'll talk about the moon phases here in a little bit.
Huge.
But first, we're going to take a commercial break and we'll get back, talk saluners, moon phases, all the aspects that trigger some of these larger striped bass. You're watching the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. We're coming right back to you with more striped bass.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by SIMRAD. Go with SIMRAD and go with confidence. Penn, let the battle begin. SiriusXM Marine, weather, fish mapping, and entertainment for anglers. Mercury Outboards, go boldly. ENGEL, portable fridge freezers and high-performance coolers. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
Welcome back to the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. The topic is striped bass. I'm here with Ryan DeGraw, John Owens, and crazy Alberto Nee. Alberto, before we left the commercial break, we were talking about that magic period and calculating when and where these bass are going to be. Give me your experience on that and truncate it.
Truncated. Oh, we're going there.
We want to
All
go right to the nitty gritty.
All right, it's very simple.
No long stories.
You know, no long story. Make it simple. The prime months, you're looking at, based on the migration, you're looking at month of May, June, September, and October. That's the premium prime heavy migration in located area. Around the new moon, 4 days before, 4 days after, and near the slack water. The biggest of the biggest will come out, and historically, the previous world record holders, they all have caught under the same circumstances.
Very intriguing, very intriguing. John, circling back more to the artificials, because you're fishing with a lot of artificial. I see you have soft plastics. And again, what is the subtleties of working a soft plastic for striped bass?
So the scenario is, for me, is I use a lot of swim baits and weedless. I'm fishing in the Cape Fear River a lot, and it's full of timber. You get hung up, you don't get it back. And for me, it's a slow and steady retrieve. Throw it out and just slow roll it. I find that the smaller stripers will nose it a little bit first. You'll get a little bit, almost like a trout bite, a little tink. And about the time they do that, you better go ahead and rear back and set the hook, because then they'll eat it. Where the bigger fish have a tendency just to inhale it. But the most important thing I found is the bigger fish tend to be a little deeper than the smaller fish. We'll find those smaller fish on the drop-off ledges around creek mouths, grass lines, creek flats where the creek drops out and it gets deeper. But those bigger fish are a little deeper. And the most important thing is, when we're fishing these fish, is a steady, slow. I tell my customers, you really can't fish it too slow. It can rub the bottom, but don't stop reeling, because if you stop reeling, it becomes it's not weedless anymore. And then I like a swim bait hook that has a large playing field. So when those fish hit it, it's very easy for them to get hooked, because sometimes they'll do a quick bump and not eat it. And you've got to hit them and cross their eyes, just like those fluke.
All right, real quickly, what pound test lead are you going, mono or braid on the main line?
Braid on the main line.
What pound?
15 on that, 15 pound. And my leader is 30 or 40 pound fluorocarbon. Fish in tannic water, kind of like the fluke. We're going back to that abrasion resistance. You know, these fish, it's about abrasion resistance, rubbing the bottom. But the biggest power point is angle. These fish in our rivers, you can cast at one spot, not get any bites, change the boat position, cast to the same spot again, and get bites. And I have found that changing the angle for these fish makes a huge difference in getting more bites.
Is there a certain time or period where the top waters might outproduce the soft plastics?
In my opinion, low light conditions. We get out there right before the sun comes up, and my philosophy is when you have to grab your pair of sunglasses, it's getting bright enough you need a pair of sunglasses, usually that top water bite slows down.
Ryan, all the live baiting you've done for big striped bass, and a lot of that is pretty much basic. What have you learned in your young years, but you do fish a lot, a little tactic that might be something subtle in live baiting that you feel gives you the edge?
So something that I actually learned at one of your seminars years ago, I believe it was Gary Caputi that actually said it. Using an egg sinker while you're fishing live bunker for striped bass is a huge advantage, especially for the bigger fish. The bigger fish, 9 times out of 10, are going to be below all of the smaller fish that are up top in the bunker school doing most of the work, sending all of the injured, if there's bluefish in the mix, chopped in half bunker, down towards the bottom, and those big striped bass will sit on the bottom underneath those bunker schools and just wait, because they don't want to go up, they don't want to chase the bunker around everywhere and expend all the energy like the smaller fish do, so they'll just be glued to the bottom.
Are you in a drifting scenario or are you in an anchored scenario?
A drifting scenario.
All right, so when that bait is down with the egg sinker, what are the subtleties? You feeling it roll on the bottom? You letting it sit and free
You don't
line in it,
necessarily want it on the bottom, because especially a lot of the places that I fish are very snaggy.
Yep.
So, anywhere from 5 to 10 feet up off the bottom, if that fish sees the bunker, it will come up for it.
What pound test leader?
When I'm doing that, I usually like to run 50 or 60 pound leader, depending on how clean the water is, and then I'll run anywhere from 40 or 50 pound braid.
One good conversation I've had a lot, and Alberta, you've been there too in our panels up in the Northeast, when they chunk or they live bait. We're out of South Florida, so we're so used to bridling baits, which keeps the hook point from turning back into bait. And I do have to throw kudos. VMC has come out with a B-LOK, a new hook, that they have a porcelain stop with some bristles on it. It's a quick bait deal that you could put a bait on it, flip it back out, and what happens, it helps keep the bait on the hook when you're pitching it fast, but it also prevents the hook from coming back into the bait, at least around by 90%.
Which is definitely going to be a huge plus this year, especially because especially with a lot of people who are newer to fishing, can't exactly just jump right into a circle hook. That's going to make it a lot easier for them, especially since that hook won't turn back into that bait as much, because that does happen a lot, especially with the bigger bass, when they turn that bunker around in their mouth to swallow it head first.
Very, very good. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some of the subtleties involved in trolling for trophy striped bass. So hang in there. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, filmed on location at the IGFA. We're coming right back.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Rapala, your best shot at a world record. Suffix, always use the best line. VMC, your expert in hooks. Williamson Lures, for the pelagic playground. Starbright, blending technology with performance since 1973. George will be right back. Welcome back to the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series from the IGFA in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
You're watching the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. The topic is striped bass. Now I want to focus with my panel on some of the tricks involved in trolling up larger striped bass. I have Ryan DeGraw, John Owens, and Crazy Alberto Nee. Ryan, I'm going to start off with you, because I've had some incredible trips up in Jersey. And being an offshore troller, I marvel at what an art it is trolling for striped bass off your area. And what I really marvel at is, like, you use these lures that look like downrigger weights to get down there, and it crushes the bass. And it's just really a unique deal. But tell me maybe some of the subtleties involved in trolling. When would you troll versus live baiting? Does trolling serve a certain purpose?
So trolling is great for finding fish. A lot of times when we do a lot of plug fishing specifically, the people that I fish with, and a lot of times when we're going around looking for an active feeding school of fish, we will troll. The mojos, which is the strange downrigger looking baits that you were talking about, are a great way to do this, because you can cover the entire water column with just 4 or 5 of them. We'll fish tandem rigs, and you'll fish a super heavy one on the bottom to get that all the way down there, and then you'll fish a lighter one on top that kind of comes up off the bottom. You can fish single ones to kind of, dictate where you want it in the water column, if you want it up higher, if you want it deeper, if you want it right in the middle, depending on where you're getting your marks. So the Mojo is definitely a very, very agile tool.
And what's unique, we had done a show with Tom Daffin out of Atlantic City. He had the Mark 6 sent up there, and he and I got together, and we were targeting striped bass, and we found the bunker schools, and you could see everything. I thought it was like the Miami Sea Aquarium. You see whales in there, the whole bit. It's an amazing sight. So, we mixed it up. We put the Mojos down in the water column, and we interspersed that. We had 3 plugs at least of the CD18s, and then we had the CD30s and the 40s from Rapala. And I remember, like you had said earlier, you watch the nervousness of the bunkers, and we would get in there and watching the SIMRAD machine, you would see the bunkers, but then you would see the striped bass under there, and you're like, oh, we actually had a period where we were trolling. And one rod goes down, the second rod, he's keep it going. We had 5 rods out. We loaded 5 rods with these trophy class striped bass, which to me, that's so totally intriguing. But what do you feel when people are trolling, be it with swimming plugs or whatever, that maybe 1 or 2 of the biggest mistakes they're making that really go against them?
I would say that you need to be going somewhere between 3.4 and 3.8 knots. I think that the biggest mistake that people make when striper trolling is either trolling too slow or too fast. Somewhere right in between 3.4 and 3.8 knots is right where you want to be.
The Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. Stay cool and protected while fishing. Calcutta Outdoors. Hard-working outdoor gear. JL Audio, ahead of the curve. ACR, building survival products since 1956. Florida Keys and Key West. Visit flakeys.com. George will be right back. Welcome back to the final installment of the 34th Annual Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Let's get right back to George.
And I noticed that you use a lot of super heavy leaders on the bass. I guess bass are sort of like our groupers. They're not really leader sensitive, at least the big ones are. Is there any tricks? I guess when they're eating, they're going to crush everything. I was about to say.
In terms of trolling, 9 times out of 10 when you're trolling, you're getting more of a reaction bite than anything else. That Mojo comes skirting across their face on the bottom. They snap at it. They're aggressive fish, and they do get territorial sometimes. So I feel like, 9 times out of 10, that bait just comes whizzing past them, and they just snap at it.
Very intriguing.
Leader doesn't really make all that much of a difference in trolling.
And I noticed too, especially with the big downrigger type lures, that when you are getting set to bring a bass in a release, that you always keep the boat going. You slow it way down just to keep the boat helping to keep this weight or these hooks from falling out.
So, and it's the same thing with bunker spoons too. I tell a lot of people you need to keep the boat moving. I would just keep one engine in gear, just barely in gear, just so that you keep that forward momentum going to keep tension on that hook, even if the fish starts shaking his head or, the angler has a little bit of a mishap near the boat and allows slack in the line. Keeping that boat forward will always, give you a little bit of an insurance policy.
John, do you do any trolling? I know you're an artificial, a lot of casting. And
we do some trolling in the rivers. And typically for the trolling scenarios for me is going to be the coldest part of the winter when it seems like the fish get a little bit deeper, a little more sluggish, and I need to cover a whole lot of area. But trolling covering a whole lot of area, and we'll usually use like bass crankbaits. And the most important thing I found is I don't mind that crankbait hitting the bottom a little bit, but as we know, if you drag it long enough on the bottom where there's timber, you're going to lose that $9 to $12, $14 lure. And these are the small ones. These are the bass ones. So they're not like these even jumbo ones that are $30 and $40 and $50.
You got to take a loan out to buy one of those.
That's right, but you still don't want to lose them. So I try to get a lure that'll bounce the bottom every once in a while, and the biggest deal is I'm constantly watching the fish finder to keep myself in that depth where I feel like I'm marking some fish, I'm seeing some bait, but I'm not plowing the bottom, but I can bounce every once in a while. That seems to be, it keeps the fish coming and it keeps me from opening up my wallet.
And you open up a can of worms with Alberto.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God. I mean, the biggest of the biggest, as you said earlier, they are on the bottom. And having full contact closest to the bottom is key.
It is.
All right. Look at this as an example. This is a bucktail. If you notice that there's no paint, it's basically...
It was a bucktail.
I'm sorry, you're right. It was a bucktail. The key
tense.
thing is it's about to sweep, working very close to the bottom. At the same time, as we were talking about, okay, you were saying, Pods of schools, pods of school. How do you know which pod is effective? Yeah, you have happy bunker, flip, flop, 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 and you have those big explosions. Duh, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that body of fish. And therefore, I mean, come on, let's get real here. Throw anything like this, and he's nodding yes. Something big, not so much in the middle school, outside the skirts. That commotion will drive the biggest of the biggest out and chase something big.
Give me 30 seconds of stuff that you've worked for 50 years.
The most important thing that anybody should do, pay attention and use your eyes, use your senses. As you were saying, pods of school, you know there's nervous bait, that's where you fish. Fish, low condition tides, ugly weather. Those people who says, oh, I don't want to go fishing, go out there. You're going to be out there. Somebody's going to be out at home wishing they're catching. You're going to be out there catching, but near slack water, tide is everything. Near that slack water, it's key. Moon, wind dictates where the body of fish is going to go. Hence, guess what? Wind is going to push the bait. It's going to go that direction, you go that direction. Don't fight it. It's Mother Nature, and use it.
You've been watching the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series presented by Bass Pro Shops and Mako Boats. Stay tuned. We'll be coming up with yet another exciting episode. Well, there you have it, this week's Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series. Now, adhering to Saltwater Sportsman Seminar Series tradition, you still have chances to win door prize drawings. Simply go to nationalseminarseries.com, log on to the door prize page, just give us your name, phone number, and an email address, and at the conclusion of the airing of the series in December, we will draw for a number of excellent door prizes. Get right to it. We'll see you on the next episode of the Saltwater Sportsman National Seminar Series.